afternoon. My name is Jürgen Steinmetz, joining you from livestream.travel and eTurbo News in Honolulu. Today, we will take you to Montreal to find out more about ICAO and how ICAO will navigate aviation to a new normal. ICAO is the International Aviation Agency in charge of the global aviation industry and an affiliated member by the United Nations. You will meet the new elected Secretary General, who will start his job shortly. You will meet international aviation professionals asking questions and sharing concerns, including Vijay Poonoosamy, the chair of the World Tourism Network Aviation Group. Before we start, there is a 3-minute introduction of ICAO. So for those that don't know ICAO, get a better idea what ICAO is and the important role this organization will play to bring aviation back to a new normal.
The world is an amazing place. It's where we travel and where we trade, where we explore and where we discover, where we connect and reunite. And for the last 75 years, it's been aviation that's connected us, building bridges across our skies. The International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, is the UN agency where countries come together to build those bridges. They make them by using international laws and standards which together make up an historic agreement called the Chicago Convention. The convention is designed to help the countries of the world to share their skies. It aligns the aviation regulations of 193 countries and opens our planet to the wonders of flight. This global system of international cooperation helps aircraft carry us farther and faster than any generation in history, making sure that airports and airlines operate safely, securely, and efficiently, and improving noise and emissions every step of the way. Air transport today carries and connects more than 10 million passengers on over 100,000 flights, not every year, but each and every day. Flying those 4 billion passengers in addition to 56 million tons of high-value cargo employs over 62 million people globally and generates almost $3 trillion in global GDP. All this activity drives an incredible amount of economic growth and prosperity wherever aircraft fly. And it explains why connecting by air is so essential to sustainable development and economic growth all over the world. But for all it's accomplished, global aviation faces a lot of challenges today. Current passengers and flights are forecast to double during the 2030s, meaning it needs thousands of new aviation professionals to operate the future network. That requires education and training. And importantly, it means that a lot more women will be joining aviation's ranks. Traffic growth also poses emissions concerns. But industry and governments are working together on a carbon-neutral future for international flight. And in terms of safety and security performance and managing our skies efficiently in the years ahead, ICAO global plans are helping the world cooperate towards strategically aligned targets and goals. As it celebrates its 75th anniversary, ICAO and aviation are on the cusp of an incredible future. Many exciting innovations are already ushering in a new era of flight. And as they do, ICAO is making sure our amazing global system continues to progress based on global solutions, and that the spirit of invention and adventure at the heart of all aviators is never diminished. Aviation has made our world a more intimate place, helping us appreciate and benefit from each other like never before. On the 75th anniversary of the Chicago Convention and of international cooperation fulfilling the promise of flight, aviation continues to unite the world, and ICAO unites aviation.
He has a 26-year international civil aviation career in Latin America, the Middle East, and he's had all types of senior roles in multilateral transport negotiations, aviation management, and air transport policy. He does have a day job presently. He is Director General, which means Chief Executive Officer of the Colombian Civil Aviation Authority. And he's still in that job. I'm not sure up until when, but he's certainly. I know the president has asked you to stay there till July 31st, but I'm not going to get into those details. President of Colombia. Previously, he was senior advisor to the United Arab Emirates Civil Aviation Authority. He's worked to promote the development of aviation policy and air law, which means rules-based stuff, not only in his home country of Colombia, but also in Latin America. He was president of the Latin American Civil Aviation Commission, LACAC, for a number of years. He maintains close ties with We People in University. He's guest lectured in my classes in McGill's Aviation Management Program times. He's also lectured many times at McGill's Institute of Air and Space Law in Colombia and elsewhere. He speaks fluently Spanish, English, and French, but he also speaks Arabic. He's studied, worked, and lived international citizen in South America, North America, and the Middle East, but he's traveled to all corners of the world. He is not an enthusiastic, but he's also a great negotiator and consensus builder. He's a wonderful diplomat. ICAO could not have found a better person for the position he's going to be dealing with as 193 men, with a lot of different interests. So, he's coming at a very challenging time, as you people know. So, Mr. Juan Carlos Salazar, would you please, I pass the torch on to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Saba, and I want to thank McGill University and the Faculty of Continuing Education for inviting me today to a very relaxed conversation with a dozen of students of your class, where we were going to look at the future of, say, ICAO in the coming years. And the only thing I want to say is that I came very relaxed, very informal for that conversation. And I guess your introduction is longer than my presentation, Dr. Saba. So thank you for those kind words. You have been a colleague and a teacher and a friend, I have to say. And definitely it's very important for me in different moments of my life. So that's why I'm here today. And if you allow me to share a few ideas, I have a presentation that I wanted to share with you that it is related to the vision for ICAO. As you were mentioning before, ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, is a very important international organization that has responsibilities in establishing the standards and recommended practices around the world. It also conducts oversights, audits to the member states regarding implementation of those standards and recommended practices, and also very importantly is providing support to the member states for the implementation of those standards and recommended practices, what normally is called capacity building activities. And this organization, which is as complex as an international organization can be, it has 8 regional offices, and it has many demands and expectations. It has to meet demands and expectations from all member states. And here is some ideas that I was sharing through my conversations and discussions with member states, with states that are represented at the Council of ICAO, that that we're going to elect a new Secretary General. And basically there are 4 elements that I was highlighting through all this process. The first one is that I will be working for an organization that will be working under the mantra of One ICAO. Because the organization is very complex, it has regional offices, it has different missions to comply many public goods to deliver to the member states. Sometimes there are challenges in the organization how it provides those services and fulfills those expectations. And in this very moment, we need an organization that is well articulated and will support the work that the Council of ICAO and all the member states are doing for the recovery of international civil aviation, and especially international air connectivity, which is disrupted nowadays because of the COVID-19 crisis. Also, we will be working for an organization that is recognized by the governance and the high ethics culture in the organization. Is something that is more and more demanded from public officers around the world, but also from the servants, the public servants and international organizations. And this is a basic principle that the Council of ICAO and the organization has identified as a priority to implement such culture and abide by that in the organization. A third element is that we should not forget the core objectives of the organization. The organization has already adopted its strategic objectives, and one demand in this moment is not only to recover in the international civil aviation system, but also to produce substantive progress in the effective implementation of the standards and recommended practices, and substantial progress in the strategic objectives that have been prioritized by the Council of the organization. And of course, as any or other organization, the expectation is to implement the best financial, admin, and human resources practices among international organizations. So to look what are the gold standards that are out there and improve the organization towards that end. That is the platform which I was basically discussing with different member states, and of course it is going to be my main objective, besides the charter letter, of course, that is produced by the ICAO Council, but basically the principles that will guide my work as Secretary General will be these 4 principles. And here, very important to mention the challenge that the international civil aviation system is facing. Right now, we have tremendous disruption of international air connectivity. Every state, every government around the world is very concerned, of course, for the lives and health of their citizens. And as such, it has been implemented a number of unilateral measures that have produced a disruption in international air travel. So that for ICAO and for its member states is a central challenge and a central work in which the Council of ICAO has been taking the leadership and has produced some documents, some guidelines through what is called the CART, the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, that has already produced 3 iterations of documents that provide guidelines to member states, to the authorities, to the industry, on how can we restart air services, airports, airlines, all the aviation personnel in a safe manner. How will we work in order to recover the international air connectivity and the activity of the different levels of the chain of international aviation? And that has been a tremendous work and a tremendous contribution from the Council of ICAO. The Council of ICAO continues to work with the industry, with other stakeholders to produce more guidelines, and the Secretary General, with all the personnel of ICAO, should work with the member states in order to implement those guidelines. So that is a tremendous challenge that we have. The implementation and the assistance to the member states. There are lessons learned in this process. ICAO has a very complex rule-making process in the organization. It takes years. And the challenge of COVID-19 has presented an opportunity, I believe, for the Council of ICAO and for all the stakeholders that are concerned in the current circumstance to come up with new ideas, with new forms and new ways to create those guidelines and those principles that will harmonize again, restore harmonization in international civil aviation. So this is something very important that is a lesson learned from the current circumstance, and it's a way that the Council of ICAO and the whole organization continues to work in order to be more active and respond rapidly to the needs that presents international civil aviation. And the bottom line of all this is perhaps that international travel has been affected, especially regarding the confidence of the travel public, the confidence of the governments, the confidence of the health authorities. And a central problem for ICAO, for its member states, for the Council of ICAO, is how can we restore that confidence? That is the challenge that we have now as one important sector in the economy, in the world economy, and in the economies of each of our countries. And in that process, we need to give room for innovation. We give to ask ourselves questions. We need to reinvent the civil aviation sector as we know it today. The airlines, the airports, the air navigation service providers, and other actors in this sector will need to ask with open mind, how can we reinvent this industry in order to be resilient and in order to be feasible in the future and restore the confidence of governments, health authorities, and especially the traveling public. And that is a central aspect of the work that we will be doing in the coming years. Regarding the governance of the organization, one of the aspects is that this organization has a council, a permanent council that is made of 36 states that represent all member states from the International Civil Aviation Organization. The council established the priorities, established the different programs that the organization will execute, and produce the standards and recommended practices. The Council of ICAO even acts as a dispute resolution tribunal, let's say, international tribunal that sometimes have to take decisions on matters pertaining to international air law. And in that, we will be working hand in hand with the Council, the Secretariat of the organization, but very importantly, an aspect that have come up as a result of all this process is the interaction with the industry stakeholders. Everyone is now concerned on ways to build trust, on ways to make sure that the organization produce the outcomes that the member states, that the industry is expecting to have, and also it has presented an opportunity to review the priorities or the strategic objectives for the organization. ICAO has not changed its focus from the strategic objectives, the 5 strategic objectives that it has right now. However, the recovery of the international civil aviation system, of course, is an overwhelming need, and it is a priority in which the Council and the organization is dedicating a lot of time and efforts. One of the aspects that we need to do is precisely how to coordinate better the interaction between these different stakeholders that, again, allows the organization to focus more on the needs of its member states, or the needs of the industry that is expecting a lot of deliverables right now from the organization. And the central principle in which we are working is to shed higher focus on some principles and the ethics culture of the organization. The Council of ICAO has adopted a new ethics framework for the organization, and principles like transparency, like integrity, like accountability are central to an international organization, as these principles are central to all public entities that have a responsibility before a community, before the stakeholders that have interest in the work of that organization or that entity. And one of the elements that we want to put at the center is the need to work in a collaborative fashion, to apply what some people call adaptive leadership, in the sense of understanding that there are some demands and some needs that are at the center of an organization, of a work that this organization is doing. And in order to be able to focus on that and make progress on an ethics culture, we all need to collaborate. We will need to take our part of the work and mobilize ourselves. Of course, the principles of adaptive or collaborative leadership are available there, but basically, of course, it's a different way of work that put the focus on these adaptive problems rather than on technical problems, and improve the culture of an organization, of any organization, is certainly one of the best examples of an adaptive challenge. And one of the aspects that we are going to center our work as Secretary General, of course, is in the human resources, the human talent of the organization. We have clear idea that it is necessary to lead by example. It is necessary that the Secretary General and any other person that has a prominent position in the organization model and lead by example, model the change in behavior, and has a close relationship with the different persons that actually do the work in the organization. Of course, a fair and transparent culture is important for any organization. Nowadays, for example, there are certain behaviors that are intolerant in any organization, and it is very important that this message is clearly stated for any member of the organization. Harassment and any other of wrong behaviors is absolutely unacceptable in this and in any organization. We will be working in reviewing the HR practices, the procedures and policies of the organization to align them with the new ethics framework that the Council of ICAO has been adopting. And of course, we want to focus on the needs of training and develop some skills in the organization. And at the end of the day, also, we want to implement something that will be performance bound. In aviation, there is something that is called PBN, performance-based navigation. So, of course, in the management of the human resources, the human talent, we want to have performance-based management. The financial aspects of this organization is very important. This organization for decades have been applying a principle called the zero nominal growth, which means that with the same budget, we need to deliver more and more public goods to fill the expectations of the member states that each of them are now demanding not only SARP's development, standards and recommended practices, or audits, safety oversight, security oversight audits, but now the member states are demanding more capacity building, more technical support in order to enhance the level of compliance of these SARPs. And in order to progress with the same budget, which is a policy of all the member states, we need to build trust at the basis of the whole pyramid. We need to provide a public rendering of accounts to share what the organization is achieving, where the resources are going, and how we are able to progress or not with the budget that we have, and the needs that are being demanded by the member states. But also, we need to work in the modernization of the information and computer technology of the organization and adopt best financial practices among international organizations. We have to work also on ways to deliver more efficiency, optimize the programs of the organization, and be able to make a cost benefit analysis and risk analysis of the different programs that are implemented in the organization. In that sense, a complex organization like ICAO needs a program management office, which will allow the organization to make all these programs more efficiently run, and the results of these programs to be measured and presented publicly. And of course, as any organization, we have to work in the catalog of service for the organization, how we can generate additional revenues, and even how can we attract more voluntary funds that are important in order for the organization to progress in the strategic objectives and the programs. In information technology is a very important aspect for this organization. We still have a platform that we need to modernize. And in that sense, there are some recommendations that have been put forward for consideration at the Council of ICAO. That is definitely a priority that is well understood and accepted by the Council member states, and of course by the Secretary General, the current Secretary General, and of course, in my case, as Secretary General-elect. So this continues to be a priority. We need to manage the risks that have been identified to build resilience in the ICT capabilities of the organization, to review and adopt a new catalog of services, and to be able to implement a number of additional services or portals, all web-based based on cloud services that allows the management of big data, artificial intelligence, and all the best practices in ICT security. This all is related to a digital transformation program to implement a secure document management services, a human resource management portal, an e-learning portal, and project portfolio management portal, and to update the enterprise resource planning tool for the organization. All of these will allow the organization to introduce more efficiency and also provide more transparency in the work that the organization is conducting. One of the aspects in which ICAO has been working for decades is the aviation and the environment. And in this case, the expectation, world expectation, and especially a world focus on environment and environment protection during the COVID-19 crisis, and it will be the result of the COVID-19 crisis that the environment protection agenda is reinforced, and the focus of the member states is reinforced in that area. And ICAO should make substantial progress in the emissions reductions initiatives across the board. ICAO has adopted a basket of measures. One of these basket of measures, of course, is the CORSIA program, the program, let's say the market-based measure adopted by ICAO as a mechanism in order to offset the emissions of international civil aviation. And in that sense, there is a clear idea of the Council of ICAO and the member states that more resources are needed in order to advance progress in the implementation and building capacity for the member states to make progress in emissions reductions. So, an important aspect here then is that an improved governance in the organization, reviewed a modern operational model with digital or based on a digital transformation program will allow the organization to work from silos, which are special areas that work as an independent area of practice, let's say, in the organization, to mobilize the organization to work more as a sole organization that is capable of supporting the member states and delivering the public goods that not only the states, the member states, but the traveling public is demanding from ICAO. A final mention here, of course, is that the organization has a very powerful tool. It has presence in 8 different regions around the world, and the member states are demanding a bigger presence of the organization in the region. So we are making a special emphasis in the regional needs for the recovery, to provide more assistance in the process of recovering air connectivity. The needs are different in different parts of the world. In the implementation of the standards and recommended practices, and therefore we plan an organization that is capable to work as one ICAO, but with a focus on regional needs. So these are some initial ideas that I wanted to share. I thank you, Dr. Sama, for this informal talk. And I end up with a famous word from Sir Winston Churchill, that we should not let a good crisis go to waste. The current COVID-19 crisis presents also with opportunities to rethink, to innovate, and perhaps to reinvent the civil aviation system as we know it before COVID-19. Now I am open to questions. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think, am I on the screen? I have no idea. I think I'm on the screen. Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Salazar, for a very informative presentation. As we discussed, it's primarily focusing on revitalizing, re-energizing ICAO, which is a very important UN. And you've been dealt with a pretty interesting deck of cards, all things considered. Talk about coming in from an economic crisis and a health crisis, and trying to manage it from an international institutional perspective. Now, the first question I want to address to you deals with COVID-19, which you started talking about in your present, in terms of restart and recovery. As the world of aviation, which is, it was well done, and it's important because ICAO has that as a program objective. As the world of aviation emerges from the burst effects of the pandemic, governments have been addressing the opening of their borders with a large variety of practices, passports, pre- and post-flight testing requirements, targeted country quarantines, and all types of other measures. A large number of them do not seem like they're synthesized, integrated. They're not coordinated. So the first question I have for you in terms of the pandemic, you see, because ICAO is the big international integrative organization. I know it takes it a long time to achieve anything, but it does eventually achieve something. What do you see as the role of ICAO in establishing global travel practices? For example, you've heard IATA's come out with a global passport. You talk to Airports Council International, you talk to IATA, which are all, trade associations which lobby you. You're a government, international governmental organization. But do you foresee the ability of ICAO to build some type of coordinated process to handle all this? Because each country says, hey, we're going to do our own thing on vaccination. Are we going to require a passport? Are we not going to require a passport? What tests do we recognize? What tests do we not recognize? When should a test be given? How long is the quarantine? I live in Canada. They changed the quarantine. It's now you got to stay in a hotel. No more than 2 people. 3 days in a hotel when you come from abroad, whether you're Canadian or foreign now. And you got to stay in a hotel. You got to pay $900 to $1,000 minimum for 2 people, and you have to eat in your room. And then, if you're okay, according to after the quarantine, then you go for a further quarantine for another 11 days elsewhere, which is pretty onerous. Now, I don't think all countries, nobody's doing this stuff all together, doing it their own way. So that's an example. I mean, probably when you come to Canada, you're going to have to go through that process, even if you're Secretary General of ICAO, right? So the question is, you foresee ICAO trying to integrate these broad variety of global travel practices handling COVID?
Well, the answer is a straight yes. Now, of course, you would like me to expand on that, but I want to mention that the tremendous success of ICAO and the tremendous success of the aviation industry has been built over 2 very important pillars. The first one is the harmonization of the rules in which international travel, international aviation is conducted. The second pillar, is the trust, the confidence of the traveling public that aviation is the safest mode of transportation. And in these 2 pillars, which ICAO has been instrumental, is that we have built the success of international civil aviation. And what is happening right now, these 2 pillars have been disrupted, have been deeply disrupted. Harmonization has been disrupted because every state, every health authority, every government around the world has been taking the measures that they consider necessary to protect the health and the life of their citizens. And they do it without any coordination, and they do it without asking if this is in line with the recommendations of X, Y, or Z international organizations. They simply take the actions that they deem necessary. So that's a reality, and the work that the Council of ICAO and the Secretary General of ICAO has been doing, and the Secretariat of the organization has been precisely to recover that, in a way to recover that harmonization. And so the Council of ICAO has been working through the CART, the Council Aviation Recovery Task Force, that has already produced 3 very important documents with guidelines and recommendations to all member states on how to restore, how to recover international air connectivity. And they have been producing important elements, for example, on health risk mitigation measures with aspects that are applicable to every actor in this chain: airports, aircraft, crew, cargo transportation. They have also been producing and sharing material developed by international organizations for specific sectors. For example, a guidance material developed by CANSO to support the operational safety and efficiency of air traffic services in this recovery phase. For example, the guidance material developed by IOPA supporting general aviation and the likes. But also, they have been developing what is called public health corridors, a collaborative strategy to minimize the transmission of COVID-19 in aviation. So the organization has been playing a central role in reestablishing international air connectivity by means of producing some recommendations that want to, again, restore harmonization in international air travel. And the second very important aspect in which the organization has been working, and all the stakeholders, the industry stakeholders have been working, is to restore the confidence. The confidence, first of all, from governments and from health authorities, to convince them that aviation has taken specific measures to prevent the dissemination of the virus and to control the virus at the different stages of international flights, but also to align those measures, to make it compatible. Because until we are able to convince governments and health authorities that with all the preventive measures that are in place, it is safe to restore international air connectivity, it will be very difficult to regain the confidence from the traveling public, which is disruptive. As you were mentioning today, as an international traveler, there are sometimes concerns that you don't know what requirements you will face entering a different state, or where you are making a stop in an intermediate point, then what will be the requirements at the destination point, and even more complex if you will have a set of requirements to go back to your original point of departure. So this is something in which the organization as such, the Council of ICAO, the Secretariat led by Dr. Fang Liu, the current Secretary General, the industry, the different stakeholders and leaders from the industry are working together in order to restore harmonization and to restore confidence on international air travel. Dr. Sala, your mic is off.
Okay. Did you want to say something more on the topic? Because I had a second question related to it.
Please go with the second question.
Okay. When you were running to secure the position of Secretary General, you stated that special efforts shall be made to support developing states that the devastating impact of COVID-19 pandemic. To what extent should and can ICAO, that's important, should and can, because you maybe want to, but maybe you can't. Can ICAO support these member states as part of the No Country Left Behind initiative? What actions do you consider would be helpful? Developing countries.
Well, let me give, for this question, I would like to take a historic perspective. When the organization was born, the main focus of ICAO was to create the standards and recommended practices. To put it in simple words. So in 1944, the main concern of those founding fathers of the organization that drafted the Chicago Convention is how are we going to standardize international civil aviation to make it feasible, to make feasible that a flight from Canada to China is going to can be conducted with exactly the same rules and is feasible and is safe. And ICAO has been tremendously successful on that. I believe that as any other organization in international organization. But when years come by, maybe a few decades ago, the realities presented with the need of conducting audits to the member states to check that the member states not only know these standards and recommended practices, but actually apply those standards and recommended practices. And therefore, the USOA program, the USAP program, and those programs that the organization is, the audits that the organization is conducting towards its member states were created and have been very successful in identifying some gaps, some weaknesses in the implementation of those standards and recommended practices. However, those programs have also shown that there are some member states that don't have the capacity, don't have the means, the human resources, the technical resources, the financial resources to implement and offer those levels of implementation that are expected in the from the international civil aviation community. And so the No Country Left Behind initiative was born in ICAO and continues to be a very important program in the organization. And the No Country Left Behind initiative requires or demands from the organization support, technical support, capacity building in the implementation of those standards and recommended practices, in the progress on the different plans and programs that the organization has been adopting. And here perhaps is where we have to match the expectations from the member states and the capabilities that the organization is able to offer. One way to address that need is to emphasize the support that the regional offices can offer to the member states, because the needs change. The priorities in the implementation change in different regions around the world. So it's not the same need, for example, in South America, which is the region where I am right now, than the needs they have in Europe, in the European region, or in the East African region, or in the Middle East region. So one way to address more effectively the support that is demanded by the member states and provide that support, emphasize on that support, is to strengthen the role that regional offices play in providing that support to the member states. Another way, perhaps, is to be able to craft some programs to be able to offer a catalog of services that is appealing to donor states. The organization now has the leading states in aviation that have special interest in regions in the world or in programs that the organization has, and the organization needs to update that catalog of services that is able to attract more donor states in order to emphasize the support that is needed from these regions and from these member states. So here are two ideas, perhaps, but at the end of the day, we need to match the growing demand for public goods from the member states with the capacity of the organization with this regular program, and we will need to be perhaps more creative in the way of addressing those needs.
Which means is that there's a lot more demand than money available to satisfy the demand, right? Bottom line?
As in every organization, Dr. Saba, being it public, private, or even in every home around the world, we face that problem every single day.
That's right. I'm sure you have the same challenges sometimes as director of the Colombian Civil Aviation. Not enough money. I'll address one more question, and we'll open it up to the audience. I have other questions, but it seems like there's a big list of questions there in the chat and everything. So I'll just address one question. I'll focus it on CORSIA and the environment, since it's very topical. You know, the environment is very topical. Maybe it's been pushed aside because of the pandemic, but once we rebuild, as the Americans say, rebuild better, you know, probably the environment will be an important issue, because we talked about it for years in ICAO. It's just the pandemic has pushed it aside, but it's coming back on board. CORSIA is the main program that has been, adopted by ICAO. And for those of you who want a little information, when we talk about CORSIA, it's an acronym. It talks about ICAO's carbon, C, offsetting, O, and reduction, R, scheme for international aviation. The goal is to lower CO2 emissions for international flights and to curb the aviation's impact on climate change. I mean, we're going to be talking about it more and more as we come out of the pandemic, because we were talking about it for years before. This particular program was adopted in October 2016 by ICAO but after years of negotiations. When I say years, I mean years. So I just ask you one question, and then we'll open up not just this issue, but other issues to the broader audience. Your opinion on the achievements of ICAO's CORSIA program, and explain it as best you can, because I think a lot of people here may understand it, but a lot of people probably never even heard of it. They may think it's a type of gum or something. CORSIA, you know.
Thank you, Dr. Sama. Well, the first thing I have to say is that the adoption of CORSIA was by the highest governing body of the organization, which is its General Assembly, and has been discussed permanently at the permanent governing body of. So basically, I have to clarify that as Secretary General, the role is to provide the support to the Assembly and the Council of ICAO to establish those priorities and the programs and the guidelines that the organization is going to implement in order to reduce the impact on the environment, the emissions on the environment in particular. And for that, basically, if I may start, the Assembly and the Council has adopted what is called a basket of measures. So there are measures that are related to new technologies, aircraft technologies, measures that are related to operational improvements, especially in the air navigation services areas, or in the development of sustainable aviation fuels and other types of or sources of energy in order to make feasible flying. CORSIA is one of the programs in the basket of measures. As you said, it is a carbon offsetting tool, is a market-based measure that has been implemented or has been developed, adopted by the Assembly and developed by the Council. And until now, we can say that we have been progressing in 3 pillars, basically, as an organization. The first pillar is the development of standards and recommended practices in Annex 16, Volume 4. And that is, of course, a very important outcome that the organization, ICAO as an organization, produces the standards and recommended practices. On top of that, ICAO has produced document 9501, which is a manual, an environmental technical manual that is also important in the implementation of those standards and recommended practices. And ICAO has been also working on 5 implementation elements that provide tools to the member states and to the industry in order to progress in the implementation of this carbon offsetting mechanism. I believe that the organization is making important progress in that field. Is as many of you will understand, is an area in which there are differing views around the world. And ICAO, as an international organization, brings together those views and has been instrumental in order to find the agreements or the arrangements or the common field in which it will be possible to progress as an industry, as a sector, in order to reduce carbon emissions. So there has been a lot of work already, a lot of progress that has been achieved until now. And after COVID-19 pandemics, it is my conviction that aviation and environment will be even more important and more central in the discussions around the world, and it will be very important that the international civil aviation sector make tangible progress in emissions reductions from the international civil aviation sector in order to restore confidence again, because this is another area in which the confidence in the international civil aviation sector has been at a point perhaps criticized by some sectors or by some states, and it is an opportunity again to show how international civil aviation has been preparing for this and will be able to deliver specific and tangible results.
Thank you for your very good responses, good in terms of pretty clear. Now we're going to turn to the section where you people out there are addressing questions, and there's some chat comments. I just want you to realize, just to give you a sort of a reservation, this was originally envisaged as an informal class environment way back in November last year. With my classes in the past, and of course at that time he was only important position, Director General of Civil Aviation of Colombia. Now he is Secretary General-elect, and now it's not just a few dozen students, we're talking a lot of people, and this is recorded and it's on YouTube and Facebook and everything else. So realizing that, it's been brought in as into a webinar. I'm just telling you he's in a highly sensitive political position. I'm telling him that if he feels uncomfortable with a question, because the position is very politically sensitive, he just got to say what the current U.S. President's press secretary says, Jan Psaki. I will circle back. Okay? So you're not obliged to answer.
Good.
And so I'm going to...
Thank you.
I want to maintain our friendship. So, David, can you read out some questions? And there's a fair number of them I see listed here. Questions.
Yes, we have lots and lots of questions.
So he may say I will circle back.
Yes.
Anything he feels uncomfortable with. Okay.
All right. So our first question: do you expect that the liberalization trends that we saw in international air transport before the pandemic will now be replaced by protectionism or firm protectionism in the after-pandemic era?
Well, perhaps we can expect that some states will respond like that, but quite frankly, I don't think that the liberalization trend will change forever. In fact, we can have some setbacks in some specific cases, but protectionism, I believe, is not the way forward.
Right, thank you. Next question. ICAO is pulled in many different directions, perhaps more directions than it can possibly pursue. In this time of crisis, what is it that must be done and that only ICAO can do?
Well, that's a very difficult question. In my view, is restoring harmonization. I believe that restore harmonization for international travel is central to the recovery of international air connectivity. Is central to the role that ICAO has played historically and the best outcomes that the organization can produce. And in that sense, is something that has been the central work of the ICAO Council through the CART and the Secretariat through the implementation work that has been led by the current Secretary General, Dr. Van Liu.
All right, thank you. All right, next question. Air cargo has played a unique role in the past 12 months, supporting the distribution, for example, of personal protective equipment, now vaccine, and of course, provided a lifeline in transporting consumer goods and, supported the airlines moving freight. What is your vision for air cargo going forward?
Well, air cargo is playing a central role. It has played a central role during the pandemics. We have seen it around the world, and in each of our countries. In the case of Colombia, for example, air cargo didn't stop one single day, and in fact, we ended 2020 with the highest volume of cargo mobilized in the history of our aviation system, and it is happening in many other countries around the world. So I expect air cargo to play a more and more important role through the distribution of the vaccines, for example, through the recovery of the international economies, or the economies of different states around the world. And as such, there is a very important recovery. The Council of ICAO in the last CARC document, in which states should consider to abide all restrictions that are imposed in international air cargo in order to facilitate the transit of goods, and especially the vaccines and all the elements that are required in this process of distributing. So here is yet another example of the role that air cargo is playing and will continue to play internationally.
Great, thank you. Next question goes back to your earlier comment about not wasting a good opportunity. The question is, what are your opinions on the competing voices preferring to either fall back on known aspects of aviation to provide for stability and immediate confidence, or take the opportunity to drive change, do things differently, and potentially build back better, but at the cost of short-term stability?
I'm sorry, but I don't get
no problem.
The question there.
I can explain it. So the core idea is, the question is saying there's competing voices at the moment as to whether aviation should fall back on what's known in order to achieve short-term stability, or do things differently to innovate and change, but at the cost of short-term stability. What would you say about those opinions?
Well, my opinion is for innovation, and my opinion is to reinvent international civil aviation. That's the opportunity we have. Is not only to recover and go back to old normal, but perhaps to recover and reinvent a better aviation industry.
All right, excellent, thank you. We have a comment here about open skies. What is the future of open skies and state assistance to industry in a post-COVID-19 era?
Well, that's a question for another conference, I would say. In any case, those are two elements that respond to specific individual policies, air transport policies adopted by certain but at a pace and at a level that is acceptable to every state.
Right, thank you. A question here from Daniel. How are you planning to improve aviation regulation to create certainty and help aviation grow again?
Well, I believe that in this very moment, it is very important to restore international air connectivity. That is the central problem in which the organization, ICAO, with the leadership, under the leadership of the Council of ICAO, and all the Secretariat under the leadership of the Secretary General, has been working and focusing its efforts. And we need, in that sense, to perhaps recognize that the world has changed. Now, aviation is not a silo industry. We before this crisis, we understood that aviation is so perfect and so well developed that we contain all the answers to all the questions. And this COVID-19, in a way, has given us a lesson of humility, and this industry also needs to learn from what the tremendous challenge that we face with COVID-19. And in that sense, we still have a long way to go in order to restore harmonization and make regulations compatible across the globe. And in order to do that, we will need to work with other international organizations, with other actors, and also with governments, with national governments, even with local governments and health authorities.
Excellent, thank you. Our next question, just give me one moment. We have a number of questions, perhaps you've addressed this, but we have a number of questions asking about how will you support international aviation to reach net zero emissions, climate neutral growth, lots of questions about sustainability and the environment.
Well, this is at the center of the work of the whole organization. As I mentioned, the organization, the General Assembly and the Council of the organization have been working for years now in adopting a basket of measures and in adopting a plan, a very ambitious plan, in order to contribute to reduce the emissions at the environment. So I believe that, I mean, it's central at the work of the organization that this priority, this strategic objective, it will be even more important after COVID-19, because it's central now to all conversations and to all discussions all around the world. And in that sense, my expectation is that the organization will continue to work harder if possible at the assembly level, and of course at the secretariat level, in order to deliver those expectations to progress towards the carbon zero neutral growth, and then even to move forward to emissions reductions as the very ambitious program that has been embraced by ICAO.
Right, an interesting question in a different direction. How do you find Canada's response toward its aviation sector during the pandemic compared to other countries?
Well, that question, I am afraid that I am not in a position to answer, because I'm not familiar to the full response from the Canadian government towards the aviation industry. And therefore I'm not in a position to compare it even with the response from other governments.
All right, you'll circle back.
Yes.
Okay. How do you see the future of aircraft manufacturing in a post-COVID world? Manufacturing and manufacturers.
Well, there are very interesting discussions happening among the aviation manufacturing industry. I believe that it will be a future that will open the door for more innovation in general, as a policy answer, let's say. But in which ways and how will be aircraft in future design, what sort of fuels they will utilize, What will be the capacity of this aircraft? Well, I believe that it's still an ongoing discussion. It's a rich discussion, and the fact that we have different aircraft manufacturers around the world will give us different answers, perhaps.
All right, next question. We have a lot of questions about drones, unmanned automated vehicles, flying vehicles. How do you see the regulation of that type of aviation, and what is the relationship between ICAO and manufacturers and service providers in that industry? How are you going to anticipate changes to the industry and respond?
Well, this is a central discussion now in ICAO, and I am convinced that ICAO continues to be the forum to make those discussions and find the technical solutions and the ways to introduce those actors in the use of the airspace in a safe, secure way. So in that sense, I believe that ICAO can expedite those discussions, can open the room for the contributions that some of these organizations are making in order to speed up the adoption of certain regulations and facilitate the innovation. I mean, I am responsible for a civil aviation organization in my country, and the numbers of people operating drones and the numbers of ideas and applications that every single day come to our organization is incredible. And it is very important that we standardize this industry or those applications in order to make it safe and not to make it a hazard for the development of international civil aviation.
All right, next we have some questions for students. We're being asked, what advice would you have to aspiring pilots at this moment, and what advice would you have for aspiring aviation managers?
Well, I would say that we should think, all of us, on what sort of skills are needed for the new generation of aviation professionals. This is a very rich discussion that is also happening in ICAO. There is a program called the New Generation Aviation Professionals, and here perhaps professionals, I will recommend not only to develop the technical skills, but also the soft skills that are needed in future. Skills that provide us with people that is capable of working in changing environments, that is capable of adapting to the new challenges that the world and this industry is bringing. And again, perhaps skills that develop the entrepreneurial capabilities of the people in this industry. We need to have or count with professionals that are capable of innovating, that have the entrepreneurship that in this moment is needed to reinvent the civil aviation sector.
Excellent, thank you. In another direction, what sort of measures do you see being implemented now and in the future to prevent something like this pandemic from slowing down the industry in the future?
Well, it is very interesting to see that the Chicago Convention itself, a document that was drafted in 1944, included an article on how the organization would play a role to prevent the spread of diseases. So this is not something new. Is a concern that has been present for decades, if I may say, for a century even. And as such, perhaps I cannot specifically say what sort of measures can be implemented. But one thing that we certainly need to do is to be capable of working with specialized health agencies, perhaps to have a very close relationship with the World Health Organization and other agencies, regional organizations that have the same responsibility, and perhaps to strengthen the capabilities of the organization as relates to health and prevention of diseases. So this is something that perhaps is one of the lessons learned in this pandemic, in this crisis, and something that I intend to work as Secretary General.
Thank you. A couple of questions related to the future of passenger transport and the relationship with business. With everyone working from home, people don't need to travel quite so much anymore. What do you see as the future of flying, and what do you see as the future of business travel?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, and I believe that applies to the aviation industry. It applies to the whole tourism sector. And if I can twist the question, yeah, you can work from home, but you can work from any place in the world. So in my view, the same that it has made business travel, perhaps, or traditional business travel not necessary, well, it has created a complete new opportunity for now. It is the same if I am working, I mean, for this meeting, for example, it is the same if I am in Bogota, in Kuala Lumpur, or in Montreal. And in that sense, perhaps what before used to be known as business travelers, well, it will be people that will be working from any place in the world, and they can work in the day and enjoy different settings, different cultures in the non-working hours. So I believe that there are also opportunities that this pandemic has opened, has shown, and will allow a different category of travel to be present in future. So I am an optimist. I believe that international travel will come back, a different type of international travel for sure, but we will have demand in future because the human need to connect, the human need to know and learn and enjoy is still there. It has not changed with the pandemic.
Okay, and for our last question of the evening, can you help ICAO and its stakeholders even before taking office in August?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yes. What can you do, and can you help ICAO and its stakeholders even before you take office?
Well, in that sense, my answer is that I have a profound respect for the current Secretary General, Dr. Fang Liu, and for the work that she's doing, and of course for the work that the Council of ICAO, the President of the Council, is doing. So until I come to office, I have to act with total respect and total support for the work that the governing bodies of the organization are conducting.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to thank Mr. Salazar for his incredibly insightful comments and suggestions. And of course, we all wish him much success in his role as Secretary General. I also thank him for accepting to have a broadened audience rather than just a group of a few dozen students, but now we're talking pretty much to the world. And I know that the aviation world is going to benefit from his wonderful leadership in these very challenging times. At the beginning, I mentioned to him he was given a rather challenging deck of cards. This is, the most, when you talk about business cycles, the industry, as far back as I can remember, has never been hit like this. This is outside of maybe World War II, maybe possibly, but this was traumatic. So I think we're going to have a few interesting years as we build back better, as they say, right? And I'll pass the torch on to my colleague, John Graddick, who's the coordinator of McGill's Integrated Aviation Management Program. He's going to give you a few remarks, and then I will conclude our session, which I think was pretty wonderful. John Graddick.
Thank you, Professor Saiba. Much appreciated. Just a few words about the organization that's sponsoring these future aviation seminars. We are a School of Continuing Studies at McGill, and we offer this program that, the material that you've heard tonight from Secretary General-elect Salazar is probably material that you'll be hearing quite a bit in our diploma programs. It's a diploma in integrated aviation management that starts in the fall of 2021. It is a program that really provides you with an overview, not just of the regulatory and the role of ICAO, but also talks a bit about airlines, cargo, airports, safety, security. It's a program that's quite intense in nature, but it does provide the participants in the course with the ability to really get an overview of how aviation works and where aviation has opportunities and challenges that the students can basically work with and provide some answers to. So it does provide you with an ability to better understand the state of the world of aviation and allow you to, in fact, look at the opportunities that would exist in employment in various levels of aviation. So if you have any questions about the diploma program and the content of the program, like I said, the program starts in the fall of 2021 and September 2021. Yeah, you will all be receiving information about the program as you're registered for this webinar. So please have a look at it. And if you have any questions about the program and are interested in finding more details about the registration process or about how this program can add value to progressing your career in aviation, please do not hesitate to respond to our emails and to contact me directly. And it'll be a pleasure to welcome you to our program in the fall at McGill. Thank you very much. And back to you, John.
Yeah, just as we conclude, just let me add one remark. I have, hopefully the Secretary General will now become a member of my lecturers. I always have Airports Council International Director Generals for the last 8 years. They always come in the past and the present. And Airport of Montreal, the CEOs past and present, come to my class and lecture. Mr. Juan Carlos Salazar will find some time in his very heavy agenda. He is professor and the students and motivate them, the next generation of aviation professionals, right? That's what it's called, next generation aviation professionals. Anyways, I just want to thank him again, because without him, this webinar would not have happened. I also want to thank McGill University School of Continuing Studies and Department of Integrated Management, because they provided the resources, including David. They're very helpful in monitoring a lot of this. And last of all, but most importantly, I want to thank you, the audience. And I wish you all a safe, strong, and determined year. And I end all of these things, I always use the same words. It comes from French. In French, we don't say goodbye. In Montreal, we say au revoir until we meet again. So you have a good evening, and stay healthy. Bye now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.